Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show here on Channel 1 Television. On The Point of View, we pick the right topics, we get the right guests and ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We have a very big show for you tonight because this our guest has spent a year in Ghana. We interviewed him when he came to town because it was a very important time for the country where the final stages of our IMF program, the ECF program, was upon us. We've successfully exited that program into a new program called the Policy Coordination Instrument. So we're speaking to the resident rep for Ghana for the IMF, Adrian Alter, on his reflections on the success of the ECF and the prospects of the PCI. Stay with us. Why? What's wrong?
Paper jam.
Introducing Ghana's leading pay-as-you-copy photocopier leasing company. Lease an A4, A3, heavy-duty or production machine and pay for only the copies made or design your own payment plan. Simple and tietia. That's not all. Incredibly, toners, repairs, maintenance, follow-me printing, centralized tracking all come free of charge. Remember, financial prudence is the name of the game. Folks, forget about the expensive gimmicks and be smart. Join the hundreds of satisfied clients across all the 16 regions and every sector of the economy and save over 60% of your printing costs. Visit us at www.valixlease.com or call 0244 644048. Be prudent and lease a copier. Terms and conditions apply. Valix Lease is a wholly owned Ghanaian company. Valix Lease, affordable document management solutions.
Big game today as Ghana faces England.
You forgot the eggs.
And the whole nation is ready. Shot on target. Oh, what a save! Benjamin Asari flying for Ghana.
What is it? Politics is always safe.
Every day, in the moments we love, we rely on clean and safe water that flows from Polytank.
Welcome back. So my guest for tonight is the resident rep for the International Monetary Fund for Ghana, Adrian Alter. Welcome again to The Point of View, Adrian.
Good evening, Bernard. Such a pleasure to be here today.
It's been a year already.
It has been a year, yes, and what a year.
Amazing. Is it fair to call you the transition res rep? Because I think when you came in August last year, we had, I think, less than a year to finish the program, and now we've begun a new. What was it like when you took over? What was the mandate around the period you took over?
Well, when I took over, basically last summer in August, we were preparing the fifth review, if you recall, and then sequentially we had to negotiate the new the PCI, the Policy Coordination Instrument, and at the same time we had the Article 4 consultation and to finalize the ECF review. So it was quite a busy period of time. There were a few events in Ghana as well that I had to organize. So it has been quite active. But I'm very lucky because I have a great team here in the Res Rep office, and I am very fortunate.
So the extended credit facility we signed up 2023. I think it was around May, June, I'm not sure. So that's been 3 years. How do you assess it generally? Because I know you have a big document on it. If you were to give me like a big couple of sentences to summarize the ECF from May 2023 to July 2026, what would be the verdict?
So Ghana's recovery has been quite impressive, faster and better than expected. I would say all macroeconomic indicators outperform initial expectations in 2023. And that is quite impressive. This basically reflects both strong policy reforms and ultimately also the favorable external conditions, higher gold prices in particular. So I would say on the macroeconomic stability, inflation came down quite significantly from more than 50% to now less than 5%. Reserves were rebuilt quite markedly from 1 month of import coverage to more than 4 months of import coverage. Most recent data. The growth has been resilient and actually rebounded. We had 6% real growth in 2025. We had 6.4 in the first quarter of this year. And what is important is that growth is now broad-based across all sectors. Debt restructuring has been one of the key pillars. And last but not least, structural reforms. Those helped a lot with the macroeconomic stability.
I'm going to put up a chart from page 6 of your SITH review report. Figure 1, development since program approval. And I just wanted a couple of clarifications. So I see gold price index, 2022 being the base here. Clearly, gold price have gone up. Real GDP growth done better than the program projected. Current account that does better. Revenue reserve coverage is better. Exchange rate is better. So public debt is lower. Which of these 6 is the driver? Because you did say some are policy, some are external. So gold price, real GDP, current account, reserve coverage, effective exchange rate, total public debt. If you wanted to explain to our audience which of these charts has been the most critical in the 3-year story, which would it be?
So if you are only talking about the outperformance per se, you can see that gold prices are the ones that were actually much higher than expected. And that basically led to higher exports, particularly gold exports, which are now about 60% of total exports. And eventually that led to a much stronger current account balance. The corollary of that is 2 things. One, stronger than expected growth, and reserve accumulation much faster than initially expected. So our target, for instance, at the end of the ECF program was to achieve 3 months of import coverage. We were at the end of 2025 already at about 4 months of import coverage. So all that basically shows you these positive terms of trade shock that ultimately led to the appreciation of the cedi, higher liquidity, FX liquidity, and eventually public debt came down faster than expected.
But the gold leading to higher exports was not just a price issue. It would also be a quantity of gold mined, exported, and bought, right? So how does that play in? Now this is important because the discussion has not just been about the price. The GoldBod has been used to buy a lot of gold, and the government has essentially built its reserves at a much faster rate than expected. Was that so? What was the commentary on that? Is that okay? Because they're even talking about 15 months now, GAMRAP, right? Is it okay because they are thinking of what happened in 2022 and it says never again? So we're going to build enough buffers, or are they doing it too much? Because that could come at the expense of other things. So just slight commentary around the aggressive purchase of gold and the building of reserves.
So good question, Bernard. I think so. Typically, when you have higher prices, no matter what, it will be followed by higher production of that good, because people and businessmen know that will lead to higher profits, right? So it is clear that the production has also increased gradually in 2023, 24, 25. And part of it is due to this formalization of the gold sector, right? And there has been also already evidence that in PMMC, the predecessor of GoldBod, has already increased the formal gold brought in 2024. And it's true that with the establishment of GoldBod, the government was able to channel even more and to bring even more illegal mining into the formal mining and export more of that. And those export proceeds basically brought back, led to higher liquidity in the FX market, the appreciation and stability of the cedi, and higher reserves.
We'll come back to the gold discussion, but you said the success has been based on two big things: policy reform and external conditions have been favorable. So on the policy side, there's a concern that the government sacrifice expenditure to keep the balances looking good, and that the government's objective is to have a nice paper number so it can get back on the external market. But it squeezed the expenditure too much. And people feel like they are not seeing, that's why people complain that we don't see the effect of the good macro performance in our pockets. Okay, so what is your, and by the way, chart figure 2 explains this point. So if you can put it up, the fact that a lot of the fiscal adjustment has been expenditure led. You said that yourself. There's a concern that it's too much. It should have been a better balance between revenue growth and a bit of expenditure moderation. But Atuforsen has really been almost ruthless on the expenditure side, and some people are concerned about that. What's your general commentary around that, using figure 2 to explain?
So that's in some sense it's right what you said. The fiscal consolidation has been primarily led by the expenditure contraction.
Yes.
And this is in contrast to what we were hoping at the beginning of the ECF program, where we thought that revenue and expenditure will be equally contributing to the adjustment. Okay. Unfortunately, revenue collection and revenue to GDP ratio has underperformed. And you can see we were expecting about maybe 3 percentage points increase. Eventually, we only had 1 percentage point increase. So the PCI, now we are transitioning from the ECF to the PCI, the policy coordination instrument, will focus on the revenue mobilization, domestic revenue mobilization, because this will create fiscal space durable and will allow development spending for the government and social spending as well. The transition from the ECF to PCI basically will try to address this issue. And the focus there will be primarily on the improving the systems for the domestic revenue administration, for the GRA. So ITAS rollout is one of the main, I would say, reforms, the integrated tax administration system, which allows the GRA to run risk-based analytics. The other sources would be to close the VAT gap, which is more than 50%. Eliminating some of the tax exemptions is key. And ultimately, even when you talk about ASM gold, which is currently In the LI, there is a 2% royalty. However, that is not yet collected by the GRA.
I'm still on the fiscal side, page 8 of your report, paragraph 6. The 2025 fiscal outcome was stronger than expected. We've addressed this. The primary surplus reached 2.1% of GDP, well above program target of 1.5. My interest is this next statement. This outperformance reflected lower than budgeted energy sector shortfalls and slower than expected capital project execution, partly due to comprehensive special audit of outstanding payables and commitments at end of 2024 and the rescoping of projects. The second part suggests that we sacrifice capex, and capex is critical for its multiplier effect, because if you want an economy to grow in a way that will be job creating, your capital expenditure spend is very important. Some people are concerned about the sacrificing of capex, although you explain that some of that is due to the audit of payables. But the other one is the lower than budgeted energy sector shortfalls. Does that suggest that the energy sector is performing better than you thought? So clarify the energy sector lower shortfalls and also comment on the sacrificing of capex and what that would mean for our long-term sustainable growth.
Okay, Bernard. So let me start with the energy sector shortfall. Basically, the government in the 2025 budget had in mind a certain exchange rate. And most of the expenses on the energy side are in dollars, right? Imports of fuel. So fuel suppliers are paid in dollars. All the IPPs are paying in dollars. Contracts. Exactly. So when you translate that into cedis, if the currency appreciates, then there is an improvement. But that is not the only source of this overperformance, if you want. There has been slightly better revenue connection at the ECG. There has been a better implementation of the cash waterfall mechanism. And then also the government has been more careful about the energy mix and trying to reduce the costs of producing electricity. Using domestically produced gas is much better than importing liquid fuel from abroad. So all these measures are, I would say, essential to the sector's profitability and eventually
so that's on
reducing the fiscal risks to the government.
But what about the capex point, that if you're even going to sacrifice expenditure, capital expenditure should not be sacrificed for a developing state like ours, where this is roads, power plants. These are, if you spend money on salaries, I know the labor will not be happy, but it's just consumption. But if you spend money building a bridge, creates jobs, people can bring their food into town, roads, rail. So capex capex is a good measure of your long-term growth prospects. That's my point. So if the finance ministry is squeezing capex, it doesn't bode well for your long-term growth prospects. That's my concern. Is the fund concerned about that?
So that's a very good point. And so first, let me clarify why reducing capex was essential. Basically, the government in 2025 inherited a large stock of arrears, and basically it needed to address a much larger fiscal deficit in 2025, right? That was brought from 2024. Basically, to deal with that issue, it had to cut some of the expenditure, and at the same time, it had to put in place much stronger controls, such as the commitment authorization.
Yes.
Then those measures were primarily to reestablish confidence and trust in the public finances.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, going forward, the development needs for Ghana are essential, and they are quite large because Ghana is a developing country, and we acknowledge that by relaxing the fiscal stance from 1.5% primary surplus on a commitment basis to 0.5% of GDP, and that basically allows an extra percentage point of GDP to be spent on development needs starting in 2027.
So definitely the finance ministry has done well in restoring confidence in the fiscal management. And for those who are interested in that, we'll put the chart up. If you look at figure 6, there's a very interesting figure on audit and review of capital project portfolios, with about a number of them rejected, a number pending validation. That was quite interesting. Finance minister mentioned that in an interview with him as well. This is the point of view. When we come back, we have a couple of big questions for Adrian. How sustainable is the recovery? Right? Because some people feel this is all a gold story. 64% of your export is one commodity. Prices are doing well. So if the prices tank, is that the end for Ghana? So what kind of buffers has the country built around its own recovery to ensure that it doesn't collapse? And then, of course, what are the prospects for other sectors like cocoa sector, the banking sector? The rates have come down from the central bank. Is the banking sector responding enough to give credit to the private sector? These are key issues we'll be looking at as well when we come back. Stay with us.
My line of work, confident smile is everything. Kel Charcoal Toothpaste keeps me on top of my game and ensures my smile is always radiant and bright.
With the tiring nature of my job, we spend several hours under the scorching sun. To keep our teeth white and our breath fresh all the time, we use none other than Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. You're on a Kessie and in a kit one.
Mayo pendini who be here make us papa dia to ama me manfo Kel Charcoal natural ingredients and a bomb se ho ban e ma ne swen ne sanso mama hoto so e wo bedwam.
Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. Choose Kel Charcoal Toothpaste for anti-cavity, whiter teeth, and fresher breath all day. Available in 80 gram and 150 gram. Grab yours today.
Kel, happy smile. This advert is FDA approved.
This shirt alone can command respect.
You haven't even checked the price.
Real men check quality first. Fear comes later.
Card, please. Wait.
What again?
Check the amount first. Madam, it's correct. Please show it to us.
25,000.
Oh, it's a mistake.
That's sister, why?
Oh,
am I buying the shop too?
It's a mistake. I'm sorry.
My spirit almost left my body just now.
Daddy, please check.
Good. I feel you do Mizima.
Network issue. Please give me the card so I'll go and check inside.
No, the card stays with him.
Always confirm the amount before tapping or entering your PIN, and never allow your card out of your sight. Spot the fraud. Stop the fraud.
This message is brought to you by the Ghana Association of Banks.
From the grandest stage, the badges change, but the passion remains.
It's a special goal! Come at the hour, come at the man! This football is from the heavens. What a story this is!
10 months of drama lie ahead. The stage is set.
The biggest stars from the world's biggest leagues on Supersport. It's on DSTV.
Welcome back. This is still the point of view. Tonight, we're speaking to Adrian Alter, who is the resident rep for the IMF in Ghana. I call it a transitional rep. He came in August 2025. He's done a year. The 3-year extended credit facility has ended successfully. Now we have joined something called a PCI. Maybe let me ask you what a policy coordination instrument is, because indeed, when it was announced, some of the, I call them progressive forces, labor unions, and they were like, why do you even need to continue with PCI? You've done the ECF, it's fine. You've given us money. We've recovered. What's your problem? Go. So why are you still here with PCI?
So on the I would say, okay, let me start with why the transition from the ECF to the PCI is such an important milestone. I would say it's historical.
Okay.
The ECF basically try to deal with crisis management, and the IMF try to basically help to finance the government, support its policies, help with technical assistance, and also with training, etc. Now, under the PCI, the Policy Coordination Instrument, there is no IMF financing, so everything else still stays. And the PCI basically is a mean for the government's economic program and priorities to be independently assessed and monitored by the IMF. In fact, is a stamp of approval on the government's policies, and that is important for the government in relationship with development partners, markets, investors, and that will basically make Ghana and Ghanaian government show commitment to the policy reform. So I would say the role of the IMF changes from crisis management support to now helping Ghana maintain the gains, the macroeconomic stability, improve key institutions, continue to build buffers, and at the same time provide structural reforms for inclusive growth and job creation.
There's a cynical view that the fund also wants the country to go back to the markets so that after the stabilization of the macro performance with all its concomitant credit ratings, the idea is that the country should go back and raise financing from the international capital markets. Now, some people believe that that should not be the objective of a country. A country should be able to mobilize enough domestic resources to develop. But it seems as if usually what the fund wants to achieve is, well, you've balanced your books, you have a nice figure on paper, you can go back for help from the international capital markets, some of which borrowing took you to the fund in the first place. All right, so that the fund should be more, and this is not to use a general question, the fund should be more strident in analyzing the risks of sovereigns going to the international capital markets. That they should be more explicit about the risks, because it seems as if the so-called progress continues, we will end up at roadshows, go back to the bond market. And then it then spirals a whole. So what's your comment on that concern?
So I don't think the fund pushes countries to go to the market. Basically, the fund wants the country to eliminate the economic imbalances and then be on its own feet to finance both domestically and internationally from the sources that it has. And international capital markets are another source for financing. I would say Ghana needs first to reestablish itself, and it needs to improve its rating. You know, the finance minister has an objective to become investment grade. And basically that means lower borrowing costs. With higher ratings, you have lower borrowing costs, both from international markets, but even from other sources. So I would say it's no rush into international markets. Our focus has been on reopening domestic capital markets, so basically reopening the bond market, which has been closed in the aftermath of the domestic debt restructuring. That happened in March. So the government issued a 7-year bond domestically in local currency. However, going forward, there are large gross financing needs. There is a lot of debt that needs to be refinanced, rolled over, and there are development needs on top of that. So the government needs to have a strategy, a debt issuance strategy, in order to meet those obligations.
So let me press this. So the fund will not force any country to go to the market. So I'm not saying that at all. Indeed, we've been described as moderate risk of debt distress, which means that the fund is concerned about our debt status and does analyze our ability to pay as a very important part of our economic health. My query has to do with whether over many years, the cycle of debt accumulation from capital markets, sometimes at rates that don't make sense, which leads countries on a borrowing binge, all right? Whether the fund has been has pointed that out enough. Okay, that's question one. 1A. So 1B is also around the currency appreciation over the past few months was achieved over the past year, was achieved without borrowing more money. Because we've been in this country where we've gone to the international bond market to raise $1 billion for the sole purpose of currency support. So people are like, what's the point? Because you can't support your currency by borrowing forever. So if you're going to come up with a domestic approach, maybe accumulate gold reserves to keep your currency strong for a period to even bring in extra benefits, like what you just pointed out to, the electricity tariff issue. Maybe we should probe the benefits of that better and warn countries more around their appetite for borrowing from the current capital market arrangement, which is why I'm concerned about whether the fund identifies the risk of going to the market and what it does to countries over a long-term period.
Okay, Bernard. So let me start from what you said about the rating, and so the DSA, the debt sustainability analysis, basically at the end of the ECF showed that the rating has been upgraded from high risk of debt distress to moderate risk of debt distress, and this is first time after 13 years. So it's a huge achievement, I would say, and it's 2 years before we were expecting that to happen. All macro indicators, all debt sustainability indicators have improved, and they are below the thresholds. Now, if you look at public debt, only central government, it reached 45% of GDP level. Okay, that is also what we hope to achieve in 2034. Which is over the medium term, if you want. Okay. Now, part of the expenses in the government, and now I want to come back to your question about borrowing costs. So a large share of the expenses on the budget side are interest expenses. Okay. About 1/3.
Yes.
And what the government needs to do is basically to lower those costs to make space, fiscal space, for other development needs, to pay salaries and for social spending. And you mentioned CapEx. So if you want to ramp up CapEx spending, then you need more space in your budget. Part of that CapEx spending can be financed domestically with domestic revenue mobilization, for instance. But domestic revenue mobilization is a very slow animal, as we have seen, right? It moves like a worm. Yeah. So what we need is to ramp up domestic revenue mobilization, and at the same time to get more of the financing savings on the domestic side to be put into government securities and so on. But I would say that that's also the government basically competes with the private sector, and that's where we hope the growth would be led from. The private sector should be the one creating jobs and boosting growth. So part of those resources in the domestic economy are going to the private sector. And we have seen recently private credit increasing even 40% year on year based on the latest statistics from the Bank of Ghana.
Wonderful. Let's just deal with the issue of how sustainable the progress has been. Clearly, the country has done better by end year 2025 than it did in 2022. Even by mid-year 2026, everything is better. You showed that in the initial stage. Some people are concerned that all of that has been the gold story, and that if the prices of gold tumble, we're going to have a problem. So they call it a concentration risk around one commodity. So let's deal with that first. Does the review identify the overdependence on gold, and how does it propose the country reduces its vulnerability to that single commodity as its lead export driver?
So first, let me say that the recovery is sustainable if the reform momentum continues. I would say the key risk is policy complacency.
Okay.
That's the number one risk. Other risks obviously include weaker commodities, gold in particular you mentioned, but also it could be cocoa prices, it could be energy prices, which are all jointly affecting the current account balance. Now, on the other risks that the economy has, we have seen climate shocks also important, and geopolitical tensions can also lead to tightening of global financial conditions, higher energy prices, etc. So I would say there are a multitude, a plethora of risks around us. And I agree with you that gold, because of the concentration on the export side, gold prices are is a relevant risk for the economy. And that's why diversification is key. So moving into agro-processing, manufacturing, all the other services that are needed in the economy is key for the economy to remain resilient. And at the same time, continue to build buffers, both external and domestic, is important to stay on top of the risks and the shocks.
So the fund does commentary on gold in a number of ways. On the Article 6, on the 6th review under Article 4, you talk extensively about the GoldBod. But you also have succeeded in getting everybody to agree that the operations will no longer be under the central bank. So I need two things from you. Why is the fund concerned about the Bank of Ghana's sort of bearing the brunt of, I'm not sure if that's the right word. Basically, why should the operations of the GoldBod not be on the books of the Bank of Ghana? Why do you think that the BOG should not do what you call quasi-fiscal operations? Explain that first.
Okay, so let's clarify a few things. First, gold plays a central role to the economy, and that helped higher export proceeds, helped with the stabilization of the cedi, helped with rebuilding reserves. Okay, so we have established that. Secondly, the lessons from the domestic gold purchase program are also that we need to be careful about governance, transparency, reporting, and care about the costs incurred by the program. Now, the IMF analysis basically shows that the DGPP, throughout its history, has led to significant losses to the BOG, which ended up with equity of negative 7% at the end of roughly 7% at the end of 2025. Part of that was driven by the DDP. Part of it was driven by the DGPP, the Domestic Gold Purchase Program. So the main point here is that the central bank cannot be involved in this activity, quasi-fiscal activity, because its balance sheet is deteriorating, and that basically can interfere with its primary mandate, which is price stability. Okay, so how it can interfere is basically the central bank has operational costs, and it has cost for sterilization, and if it decides that this is too expensive, then it affects their balance sheet. They might not do that, and then you will see prices skyrocketing, and that's not something that we want to go back. So we want them to maintain price stability as their primary objective, and that's in the second one is central bank independence. That's key. When you talk about fiscal dominance, basically lending to the government, you need an independent central bank. The BOG should not lend to government entities. They should get that financing from the markets, from the commercial banks. So now basically the operations have been moved from the BOG to GoldBod, both buying and selling of gold. And therefore, the government, together with GoldBod, will need to think thoroughly about financing model, about how to minimize the costs, and at the same time maximize the benefits of this program. So, in a way, it's not, I would say, the move is the first step. We have seen the government taking steps to, let's say, reduce the costs. There were 15% in 2025. They're on the path to reducing that to 5%. And then they need to think whether scaling up this program can be sustained in the long term.
Let me talk about the central bank generally. We understand why they need a good balance sheet. And we also know that their negative equity was driven by not just the quasi-fiscal operations of the gold, but there were other things, sterilization and other things. But there's a general view that the way the fund interprets the mandate of central banks generally, and the Ghana Central Bank in particular, is not the best. So, for example, I interviewed Professor Charles Aka from ISE. I interviewed him, I think, a month ago, 3 weeks ago. He says our monetary policy must be shifted actively towards the objective of bolstering economic growth and job growth. He quotes Joseph Stiglitz. You know Joseph Stiglitz?
Of course.
Yes. And who says, central banks' unwavering determination to increase interest rates is truly remarkable. In the name of taming inflation, they have deliberately set themselves on a path to cause a recession. You know those arguments. And then he also quotes somebody else. He says, in Ghana, our inflation, and he actually quotes the World Bank. He quotes the World Bank report 2023-53. And he says, rising demand can result in higher prices, leading to increased demand for labor and reduction in employment. As a result, those just below the poverty line could be left out of poverty if all incomes rise. So he's talking about if theoretically inflation is not a good thing. But in this emphasis, this is unlikely to have occurred in Ghana. Inflation in Ghana has been mainly driven by high food and energy prices, leading to increased poverty. This type of inflation is cost-push inflation and unlikely to increase employment. Then he goes on to even show me a chart where the growth of money supply in Ghana compared to its peers is very low. So his argument is that restricting the central bank to just inflation targeting and trying to focus on just lower prices from a monetary side is a misdiagnosis of Ghana's inflation problem. All right. He made this point. I don't know if you watched the show. He made this point very strongly, and I promised him that I'll ask somebody from your side to comment on it. So if he feels that, number one, we are limiting the money to the central banks generally to just inflation management, that they must think about jobs and growth. Number two, our inflation is largely supply side driven and not a consequence of money supply. And therefore, trying to limit the growth of money as a means of curbing inflation in Ghana is a misdiagnosis. So this argument he makes, and I want your your response to that.
Okay, so let me take you back to a few things. Thank you for the question, Bernard. So first, I would argue the following on the mandate of the central bank, okay, and the inflation targeting regime that has been in place for more than 25 years, okay. About a large part of this 2 decades almost, inflation was way above the target. Okay, so that shows you that it's not was not so well implemented. Only recently we have single digits inflation. Okay, so one argument, and that has been brought down from 50% to less than 5% through multiple channels. Interest rates is one of them, but also exchange rate appreciated, fiscal tightening also contributed to that. Central bank independence is key to this, because if you have fiscal dominance, then you are printing money, and that can lead to inflation further. So all those channels are key to preserve price stability. Now you come back and you say, look, interest rates are too high, right? But we have seen that even with high interest rates, growth exceeded 6% this year, okay? And that basically shows you that the transmission channel and transmission to credit is not only through these interest rates, and there are other factors that matter there. But macroeconomic stability is key, and inflation, basically low inflation, stable prices is one of the key ingredients, if you want, of macroeconomic stability.
What about the point around our inflation being more a food price and a supply side shock than a monetary growth? Indeed, I wish I will show the chart. He compares us to most of the peers, and M2 Plus has not grown in Ghana that significantly compared to most of our peers. And his point is that always talking about money supply as the real driver of inflation in Ghana is not correct. That we should focus more on supply side issues. Let's produce food, let's make food cheaper, and that type of thing. I don't know whether that's something you want to do, because you didn't comment on it in your first answer.
So on your point about how inflation is driven, I think there should be more analytical work on that. But okay, what I can tell you is that in the region, Ghana is not an exception. You know, there are countries like Nigeria, etc., with persistent high inflation, and one commonality of all these countries is fiscal dominance. So in dealing with this issue of fiscal dominance and strengthening central bank independence is key to the mandate of price stability and inflation targeting frameworks.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up with some key sector issues. Cocoa, power sector, two critical sectors that inevitably affect the country's performance. What is the outlook for those sectors? And what is the benchmark for success for the PCI? That's how we end. Stay with us.
G-Money.
G-Money. Feels good.
Feels good. I woke up this morning feeling brand new. Got a fresh perspective and a better view. Moving with the rhythm of the things I do. Keeping what I have and adding something new. A second wallet on the same number. One step forward, never looking back. New possibilities sitting in my lap. No stress, no pressure, smooth like that. Everything aligned and I'm loving that. Life's too short for a one-way ride. Sometimes a little more feels right. A little more freedom by my side. A little more reason to enjoy the day. Why choose one when you can have two? Why stay still when another door opens up and takes you through? That's why I'm feeling like
it feels good with two. Use G-Money, an affordable and secure second wallet on the same number. Download G-Money app or visit an agent to sign up and dial *488# to get more.
G-Money, G-Money. Give yourself more.
We are Hollard, your trusted insurance partner. We don't sell yogurt. We are not a country. We don't sell fat. We do insurance. We secure your car, your home, your business, you and everyone you love with insurance that never leaves you uncovered. Hollard, we cover you.
Welcome back. We're still here with Adrian Alter, who's the resident rep for IMF in Ghana. Originally from Romania, by the way, and we're in the year 2026, right? You're a football fan as well. And I'm told that, what team do you support in Romania?
I actually support Dinamo Bucharest.
So your rival team, Style Bucharest, won the Champions League in 1986.
Yes,
but you support
indeed.
Dynamo Bucharest.
Indeed.
You support the wrong team.
Indeed.
You support the wrong team. I don't know. We are not in World Cup season, so I won't do too much football. But let's come back to the economics. The banking sector has been criticized as a bottleneck because the central bank has consistently lowered the monetary policy rate, and the Ghana reference rate is even closer to single digit now. Some people feel the banks are not lending as much in response to that. Is the fund concerned about the effects of monetary policy and the response of the financial sector, particularly the banks?
Okay, so the financial sector in Ghana is much stronger than in the midst of the crisis, you know. So capital and profitability have improved markedly. However, as you can see in our report, there is heterogeneity across banks. So there are state-owned banks and private domestic banks that have lower capital ratios, for instance. Now, when you look at credit growth, this has been trending upwards for the past 6 to 12 months, and it reached almost 40% private credit growth year on year at the end of June 2026. Now, one key constraint, there are two arguments here. One, policy rates came down, okay, and you can see in one of the charts that once monetary policy was eased, you see private credit increasing, and at the same time the legacy NPLs were a big issue, and the latest numbers, those were 30% on average for state-owned banks, and the average of the system was about 20%, 25%. Now that ratio came down significantly. It's about 16% of total loans. So I would say the banks, with the help of the BOG, are committed to reduce further NPLs, and that will basically make space on their balance sheet to lend to the productive and bankable projects in the economy.
What about the cocoa sector? I know the new cocoa bill has generated a bit of controversy. How important is the new reforms for the cocoa sector in making it viable? What are your thoughts on the cocoa sector?
So the cocoa sector issues have been persistent for a few years, right? And we have seen in 2025-26, the season 25-26, when prices basically collapsed, that GoldBod was in difficulty of making payments to farmers, to LBCs, and so on. Now, those issues basically came on top of structural inefficiencies at GoldBod. So the new cocoa bill, which basically tries to address some of the issues in the turnaround strategy of GoldBod, are basically referring to the financing model, domestic financing or a mix between domestic and external financing. Second, it's about the pricing, the farm gate pricing, which has to be at least 70% of the free on-board FOB price in the international markets. And then key here is to adjust the price once international prices change significantly, and coordinate with Côte d'Ivoire and other large producers to make sure that there is no smuggling to other countries, reverse smuggling, and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, you have other structural issues, such as the EU deforestation, and other compliance with other guidelines and standards, such that Ghana maintains its edge of quality in the international market.
This domestic financing of cocoa is critical there because it reduces again the FX risk, because you have a product that is produced locally and then you go and borrow externally, and if your currency is not that strong, it's difficult. I want you to relate that as a general approach to even the power sector, because you also said that one of the reasons the energy sector did much better was the currency appreciation. What is the key thing that needs to happen in that sector to reduce our vulnerability and also to diversify our power sources? Because it's been a big problem, the power sector. So what is the funds or the reviews commentary around the key things that must happen in the power sector to make it sustainable?
Okay, so maybe three aspects. One, the energy sector has, as holistically, as a whole, has improved, especially payments of arrears, payments to IPPs, etc. That is one first step towards a more sustainable and profitable sector. The second is that there are still large gaps, and there are compounding factors here. First is the tariff gap. If that is not, the tariffs are not adjusted. The second gap is the operational losses. So improving operational losses is a key area of focus for ECG, GridCo, etc. And then finally is about collection of bills, revenue generation at the ECG level. And one of the key reforms under the policy coordination instrument is the private sector participation in this revenue collection, which is essential because that trickles down into the value chain of energy generation and transportation across the entire sector. So if ECG is not able to collect the bills, they cannot pay the IPPs, they cannot pay the transport, GridCo, and so on. So there are, I would say, a cascading factor from that. There are ripple effects in the entire system, if you want.
So the private sector participation is for the revenue collection and not the overall operations, because I know that the workers are very concerned when they hear of private sector participation in the ECG. So from what you're saying, just clarify that you are more interested in the efficient revenue collection. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an overall takeover of ECG by a private sector participant or a sale of ECG. It could be hiving off of the revenue collection side, correct?
That is correct. And the government has already hired an advisor on that, and there is a clear timeline to have private sector participation on the revenue collection side only. Obviously, the other issues, operational losses and so on, need to be addressed as well, with private participation or without.
Let me end with the future. So PCI has started. The discussion has been held in July. The first review is in September. And from the way I see the PCI, it's until 2029, if all goes well. What are some of the critical, and we don't have time, what are some of the critical things that must happen under the PCI for the country to be in a strong position by the end of the program when you do your final review in May 2029?
Okay, so the first review would be at the end of October, beginning of November. And the first board is around 15th of January next year.
Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify.
Okay,
this.
okay. What I saw was September 30, but I feel, yeah, okay.
But let me clarify maybe 3 points here.
Okay.
One is that macroeconomic stability is a sine qua non condition, okay? Is essential, but not sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going into the PCI, basically, we need to continue the reforms in 5 key areas. First, continue with the fiscal discipline and debt sustainability that would allow the government to create more fiscal space. Second, continue with domestic revenue mobilization, which we debated earlier.
Yeah.
Third, deal with the fiscal risks, particularly those coming from the state-owned enterprises, state-owned banks, but also climate-related risks and any other commodity price shocks that could derail the fiscal performance. And then fourth, I would say, is key for the BOG, the Bank of Ghana, to continue strengthening FX operations framework and the monetary policy framework. At the same time, keep financial stability in place. And then finally, ultimately, is to advance structural reforms for job creation, inclusive growth, and private-led growth, ultimately.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hopefully we speak again at the next review. We've been speaking to Adrian Alter, who's the resident rep for the IMF in Ghana. Really, really important to work around transitioning from the ECF into the PCI. And the PCI is going to be on till 2029. So it's a very, very important program indeed. We hope you've learned something new, and we hope you will join us again next time for another exciting edition. Thanks for watching.